A bitter custody battle ends where obsession and revenge collide. This is the Rosa Hill story. Hi, Amy.
Hey, Megan. How are you?
I'm well. How are you today?
Great. I don't have a fun mug for you, but I ordered one off Amazon this morning. So for our next recording, it'll be here.
It's just not necessary. I just don't find anything entertaining about your mugs, but that's okay. Okay.
It's for me, not you.
Okay. Well, today's case is truly a bizarre one, I would say. It's one of those, like, did that really happen kind of cases? You know what I mean? Like, is real life really this bizarre?
I think most of our cases fall into that category.
I will say there are a number of cases that do, but, you know, a lot of them you can understand. Oh, I can understand how this happened. Or, you know, maybe it was a failed attempt at a crime or a failed attempt to cover it up. But this one is just, it's still strange. And I will say it came at the suggestion of many listeners, not just one. So there's a clear interest in hearing more about the details of this case. And I think about our analysis at the criminological level at the end. And spoiler alert, the case was featured on the Netflix docuseries Worst Ex Ever, which is how I suspect most people found it. And you know I watched that series.
And that's similar to Worst Roommate Ever? Is it like the same?
Yes. It's the same maker who went on to do that one. And I suspect there'll be more seasons of both coming because they've both been pretty popular from what I understand. And I think I said it before, but they're well done. So I understand. So I'd like to thank everyone who suggested this case. I look forward to hearing your thoughts, of course, Amy, and the thoughts of our listeners. So now let's meet the couple at the center of our story. We'll start with Rosa. Rosa Lee was born to parents May and Ping Lee in Hong Kong, but the family subsequently moved to California when Rosa was a child. I believe she was about 10 or 11 years old. Rosa studied she studied applied mathematics before obtaining her position as an engineer for a tech company in the early 2000s. Around this time, May introduced her to a man named Eric Hill, who worked with May in California's social services and Medicaid program. Eric Hill lived in Alameda, California, and though he had friends, he admitted that he wasn't incredibly social. He liked to play video games with his friends, who described him as a bright, good person, who was also a little bit of a geek in a good way. I think I would say I was definitely a little bit of a geek, I hope in a good way too.
I think so.
In 2002, Eric had just started this new career with social services, and May invited the shy young man on a hike with some other people because I don't think he socialized very much, and May was more social. On this hike, she introduced Eric to her daughter, Rosa. Eric found Rosa to be very analytical and smart, but above all, he said that she did not mind his silly jokes. And I think that was one of the first attractions. The pair hit it off on the hike, so Eric asked Rosa out on a date. And I kind of think that's what May had in mind when she introduced the pair. Eric said that it was great dating, that they had lots of fun, they really enjoyed each other's company, and you can see lots of pictures of them, and it seems like they were doing all the fun things you do, new restaurants, new activities, smiling in pictures. So I think dating was a lot of fun. But Rosa was also Eric's real first girlfriend, and according to Eric's family and friends, they saw red flags pretty early on.
Megan, how old were they? They were about the same age?
So I want to say, yes, they were, because Eric was probably, he might be a little bit older than Rosa was. I think she was at the time in her early 30s, and he was around the same age.
Okay, so a little bit older. I wasn't sure if they were, just out of college or...
No. They're not just out of college, but they're also not, middle-aged like we are, Amy, just so you know. Okay, so some red flags, some examples here. When, I guess, one of Eric's friends and his father said the same thing. He said, when we asked Rosa a question, she would often whisper the answer into Eric's ear instead of answering directly. Which people
And then
found,
he would answer?
Yes. He would relay her answer.
Ooh, okay.
So now Eric wrote this off as shyness because Rosa was a little bit shyer. But then Eric said he caught her listening in on several of his phone calls, which Eric thought was odd, but maybe not something to be super concerned about. And while Eric's friends and family had some reservations about Rosa, Eric seemed so happy. So they kept their opinions to themselves because he was truly happy and he loved being with her. And, this was his first girlfriend. So I think everyone was content to just kind of keep quiet about it. And then 2 years later, in 2004, Eric proposed marriage and Rosa accepted. Now, his family was happy for him, especially his grandmother, who was Selma Hill, was his grandmother, but she went by Sally. She and Eric were very close, and Sally was really excited about the potential of being a great-grandmother. Rosa's mother, May, was thrilled as well, as Rosa and May were also very close. And after all, as we know, May was the one who introduced them and played matchmaker. Everyone was pretty happy for the couple. Eric and Rosa married in 2005. So that was very shortly after they got engaged.
Sorry, you mentioned red flags. Other than her not really speaking on her own behalf, was there anything else early on?
There were things early on. I believe that Eric started to spend, as you will, less time with family and friends, which certainly happens when you date someone. But I think it was because she didn't really want to be around them. And also, remember I said listening in on the phone calls. People were aware that she was doing that. So I think these were the early red flags. And while they married in 2005, trouble began before the honeymoon was even over. According to Eric, the pair had an argument during their honeymoon in Hawaii. Now, he said that it was really odd because your honeymoon's supposed to be this great time, and the stress was off. And he said Rosa had been stressed about planning the wedding and whatnot, but he thought once they got there, they'd be blowing off steam and it would be fun. But he said it was very tense with a lot of arguments. And in one particular argument, like a week into their honeymoon, he said that Rosa threw a punch at him and missed. I think this was the first sign of violence he saw, and he was certainly concerned, and this is just on the honeymoon.
Yeah.
When they returned home and began their married life as a couple, Eric continued working, but Rosa quit her tech job and stayed at home. I'm not sure exactly why. I don't know if she just didn't like the job and with his salary it was okay, or if they had plans for a family immediately. But with her staying home and with the wedding, the pair began to amass serious financial debt pretty quickly. And I think this put a strain on the relationship, as it will.
Did she consult with her husband about the idea of her not working anymore? Or did it kind of seem like she was erratic and she just decided and took it upon herself to just stop working?
No, I mean, I don't know if it was her decision, but I do believe he knew. It wasn't just all of a sudden he came home from work and she was sitting on the couch, not going to work or anything. This seemed to be something he was aware of. I just don't know what the reason was for the decision. At this time, Eric said that there was a strain and Rosa was angry a lot. And he felt like he was tiptoeing around her when he came home on a lot of occasions. So coming home from work and just kind of quietly tiptoeing around the house. And I think that Rosa's quiet demeanor may have been masking a concerning personality. It seemed that as their relationship deepened or they got further in, so did signs of Rosa's control over Eric. Now, in particular, Rosa demanded that Eric spend less time with family and friends. I think this went from trying to spend less time with her demanding it. And for a while, that's just what Eric did. He only hung out with his wife. He was committed to Rosa. She seemed insecure and jealous of anyone else in Eric's life, he said. And so he withdrew from his family and friends to be with his wife. Rosa became pregnant very shortly after the marriage in 2006. So just for timeline, remember, they got engaged in 2004, married 2005, and she's pregnant in 2006. The couple had a daughter named Elizabeth. And by this point, Eric was working 2 jobs to support his family. But the pair's fights were escalating. And Eric said that he became very depressed, with Rosa threatening divorce on a regular basis. I also want to say Eric had a history of depression as well, for which he took prescribed medications. And I think this was putting a real strain on and really impacting his mental health. Now, as much as Rosa demanded that Eric stay away from his family, she actually began to spend more time at her own parents' home. Remember May and Ping? And she was spending less time at her own house. Eric said at a certain point when he would come home, Rosa and his daughter were rarely there. So he was coming home now instead of a household full of fighting. He was coming home to a completely empty house, and he really wanted to be with his daughter. And he said this absence of his family really led to his depression, like, worsening. And again, he was taking medication. I'm not sure how much or for how long, but he was falling deeper into a depression until 2007. And in 2007, Rosa actually ordered him to leave the house.
So this doesn't make sense to me because it sounds like she wants him all to herself and she's having him separate from his family and friends and his support system, but yet she's like abandoning him at the same time. Correct. It's very interesting.
Yes. I wonder if it wasn't just at the same time, if it kind of happened in stages. I think she isolated him, controlled him, wanted him to prove something to her. And then I suspect once she had her daughter, I think maybe that was also the priority for her daughter, and like her fighting with him. I don't think she could be necessarily bothered with him or fighting with him anymore. I think her life just centered around Elizabeth after that.
Did she ever say that he was abusive in any way? Or
No.
It sounds like, but she never told anyone any issues she was having with him. Because I just don't want to be one-sided here. Right?
No, not at this point from what we know.
Okay.
Now, later on, there would be issues, but
Okay.
right now, nothing that she had claimed. When Rosa forced Eric out of the house, he had nowhere to go. But his grandmother, Sally, was kind enough to let Eric move in with her. Now, Sally had a longtime boyfriend named Lester, who she spent several days a week with, and it was really cute. They called each other on the phone every day at 4 if they weren't together. But she lived alone, and she had the space to take Eric in. Despite no longer living with his daughter, though, Eric tried very hard to remain a steady presence in Elizabeth's life. That was his priority. However, it became clear quickly that Rosa wasn't interested in sharing custody. She refused visitation for several months after the separation. You think about how sad that is. I always think about
Are you
this.
allowed to do that? It doesn't...
My impression here was that he was trying in the courts to establish some type of regular custody. And I bet he had visitation, but I suspect that there was always an issue. So she was kind of de facto, do you know what I mean? Like de facto cutting custody. But it came to a head because when Rosa refused to let Eric visit Elizabeth on her first birthday, Eric decided he had enough. He realized that he was not going to have regular visits with Elizabeth, so he turned to the courts and at this point petitioned for shared custody. So he wanted 50-50 now. This infuriated Rosa. So to get back at him, she contacted his employer, stating that Eric was off of his medication and had spoken about bringing a gun to, quote, shoot the place up.
You know what this reminds me of?
I feel like it reminded me of something too, but now I don't know.
Remember that case you covered where the woman would call, I think he worked on like a naval base, and she would call and say that he had like explosives in his car. And every time he tried to go to work, they would like search his car.
Did I cover a case like this and I can't remember it now?
Maybe it's from somewhere else, but no, our listeners and viewers will always get us. Every time we don't remember, they write us. They're like, I remember what you're talking about.
I mean, I'm sure it's familiar, but now that we're, at over 200 cases, I literally just can't remember which case that one was.
It'll come to me, but I remember it very clearly.
Well, you can't Google it right now, so
I can't. I won't.
I
want to.
If we don't remember, then I'm sure our listeners will let us know. All right. Well, this didn't work out very well. Eric was suspended. And remember also, he was earning the money, despite the fact, by the way, that he did not own a gun. And he clearly and adamantly denied ever making a threat of violence against his employer or his colleagues. However, this ended up working out for Eric, as this serious false accusation made the court decide that Elizabeth would benefit from a shared custody situation, and that being with her mother solely was not in her best interest. Also, I'll have you know, he was suspended, but he was cleared of any possible wrongdoing at his job as well. We both know the harm that an allegation, like a false allegation like that, can make. So this is very serious. So now Eric had Elizabeth half the time, but Rosa had another bombshell accusation. This time, she accused Eric of sexually molesting their daughter. Eric was shocked that Rosa would go that far, and of course he was investigated again quite seriously, but the claims were found to be falsified, and this once again backfired on Rosa. The courts investigated Rosa for these gross accusations and ordered her to undergo a complete psychological assessment, which is exactly what should happen in these cases. But Rosa was not very cooperative with the court orders. When she finally did do the assessment, it was revealed that she was acting bizarrely and that she appeared to be paranoid. As time went on, basically, Rosa continued to lose more of her custody rights until, get this, Eric had 100% legal custody and 85% physical custody. Meaning Rosa only had her daughter now 15% of the time, and she could not make any legal decisions.
Was she diagnosed with anything? You said there was an assessment?
Yes, there was an assessment. And, she was, I don't think she was necessarily, they said that she had delusions of like paranoia and she was suspicious, but I don't know that they necessarily diagnosed her with any condition.
I just wonder on what grounds were they able to remove the child? So that's a big difference to go from 50-50 to 15%.
Well, she's making false accusations, first of all, and they found that they found like she was acting so bizarrely that she maybe was malicious in her accusations. I think they were concerned that she was untruthful and she might not have been the most stable parent for her daughter. Eric with a stable job kept showing up, trying to do the right thing. I think he was just emerging as the more responsible, grounded parent. I will say, though, her winding up with 15% custody absolutely infuriated Rosa and her mother. But her mother, May, began serving as a liaison between Rosa and Eric at the time because relations had deteriorated so badly. Eric said that May was friendly with him despite the tension with Rosa, and that he and Elizabeth remained living with Sally during the custody issues. I think he was probably trying to save money as well and get on his feet because he was still supporting Rosa as well at this time. And he said that when he left the home, Rosa had taken control of some of the assets and the finances initially. So I don't know what their financial situation, their settlement was at this time. Despite the legal back and forth, Eric says that he remembers this as a really good time for him and Elizabeth. They were finally able to spend real father-daughter time together. He felt like it was unobstructed. There was no more strain with Rosa. So this was a good time for him. However, tragedy was about to strike. On January 7th, 2009, Eric took Elizabeth to daycare around 7 a.m., which was their regular routine. Sally was home that day, as she and Lester were not scheduled to see each other, which meant that they would have their 4 o'clock phone call. I like to point out that Sally and Lester were, Sally was 91 years old, and Lester, I think, was right around the same age. And I think,
that's so sweet.
I know. They had been in a relationship for about 10 or 11 years.
That's cute.
It was very sweet. So they had their 4 o'clock call scheduled, but Sally didn't answer Lester initially. And after a few more calls, he became concerned because Sally never missed their phone dates. So Lester called his son and daughter-in-law, Jeff and Uta Rowe, and he asked if they would check on Sally for him at her home. I don't know if they lived closer or if Lester wasn't able to drive. I don't know what reason, but the pair agreed. When they arrived, Eric was also pulling into the driveway with Elizabeth. When he found out why the Rowes were there, everyone became very concerned. As I said earlier, Sally was 91, and she was beginning to suffer from some health problems. The Rowes entered the home and stayed downstairs, while Eric went upstairs with Elizabeth to look for his grandmother. But he didn't find Sally. Instead, he saw May in his upstairs hallway. He asked why she was there, and May said that Sally had called her for help, and that Sally was currently in the garage. Eric sensed something wasn't right with May's story, so he gave Elizabeth to his mother-in-law while he made his way towards the garage because he wanted to see what was going on with his grandmother. But before he made it to the end of the hall, Rosa jumped out at Eric from one of the bedrooms. Right, I saw your face there. Eric only had time to notice that she was wearing a black trench coat before she tased him. May then hit Eric with a baton and he collapsed to the floor.
Wasn't she holding the baby? Or
She put the
child?
baby. She put the baby
Yeah.
down. The child down. The Rose heard the commotion and an argument, and they thought they heard a gunshot. So they ran out and they ran immediately to a neighbor's home who called 911. While the 911 call was being made, Rosa and May continued beating on Eric with the baton in their hands. But Eric fought back, kicking and hitting until May dropped the baton. Eric grabbed it and began swinging. He hit May in the face with the baton until May was able to wrestle it back from him. She took the baton and she put it around Eric's neck in a chokehold.
Wow. And Elizabeth is watching this whole thing?
No, Elizabeth was locked in a bathroom at this time. May put her in a bathroom and shut the door.
Okay.
But then Rosa put a gun to Eric's chest and demanded that he stop fighting. She cocked the gun while May demanded that Eric admit that he would give up custody of his daughter. This was essentially the plan. May said, at this point, we don't know if this is the plan, but May was asking him to say it. You'll give up custody. You'll give Rosa custody back. So Eric said he would, fearing for his life at that moment, while his daughter was locked in a bathroom, a dark bathroom, crying for her father, while Rosa holds a gun to him. But just then, Eric could hear sirens in the background. When the police entered the home, Eric was pleading with the women not to shoot him, that he didn't want to die. Police came up the stairs and they found the three of them in the upstairs hallway, which was covered in blood spatter, littered with tasers, stun guns, bullets, and batons all over the floor. The police didn't really know what to make of this scene. Eric was standing with his back towards the officers, and May was in front of Eric, and she was bleeding pretty profusely from the face. Eric ran into a bedroom, despite being ordered not to move by the police, but that was because he saw Rosa in the corner of his eye, and she had a gun pointed at him from another room, so he was running to get out of her line of fire. The police, however, couldn't see Rosa, so they tased Eric, who fell to the ground yelling for the officers to please help his daughter.
Thank God they didn't shoot him.
I know. Can you imagine? The police, thankfully also, they saw Rosa hiding in another bedroom, and they ordered her out. She came out willingly and calmly. She wasn't injured, but May was injured pretty badly, as I said, and she was taken from the home by ambulance. While Eric and Rosa were being detained, Eric was crying out for help, this time for his grandmother. Nobody had seen Sally Hill, and Eric was really scared. So the police began to search the home after it was secured, but they couldn't find Sally anywhere. Meanwhile, Rosa was brought in for questioning while they tried to find Sally. She agreed to talk, and during the interview, Rosa told the officers about her custody dispute with Eric. But she told kind of a different story as to why she was there. According to Rosa, she came to the house that night to discuss custody, and she said that she waited for Eric to arrive. She said Sally was not at home. She never saw her. But when he got home, he was angry. Eric was angry, and he physically attacked her, and she feared for her safety.
That also goes against what May said, right? May said she was there because Sally called her.
Yes, May said she was there because Sally called her, but that was a lie, obviously. What Rosa didn't know was that the officers had been searching Sally's property while Rosa was in the interview room, and what they found was not good. In a shed in Sally's backyard, they discovered a garbage can piled high with bed sheets. This seemed odd to officers, and when they went closer to inspect this garbage pail, they quickly discovered a human foot sticking out. And sadly, this foot belonged to Sally Hill. The 91-year-old woman had been strangled to death with many cuts and lacerations on her, as well as defensive wounds on her hands, indicating that she fought. At this point, Rosa and May were arrested for the murder of Sally Hill.
So do you think they murdered her because they were trying to get her out of the way so they could approach Eric? This seems so unnecessary.
Right. I think this is why I said it's very bizarre. Why you could see, not that we condone it, but you can see the utility in murdering Eric, right? Eric's out of the way, they get the child. But why would anyone murder his 91-year-old grandmother? What does she have to do with it?
They could have easily put her in a room and locked her in a room if they were, worried that she was going to interfere with Eric. Like, murdering her is, like you said, it just doesn't, obviously murder doesn't make sense to us at all. But usually there's some, like you said, there's some sort of utility. I don't see it here.
And you know what's even odder, too, is the method. Strangulation is very odd for females. Females against females is rare. Two females against one is rare. Murder of a 91-year-old woman, very rare. Strangulation. We have some very odd, rare circumstances of this crime, which I think is why so many people are like, what? How could this have happened and why? There is a motive, and it's not what you think it's going to be. But I will get there, I promise. For now, though, there were no deals that were going to be made in this case. Nobody was pleading and nobody was offered any pleas. And so the case went to trial in March of 2011.
Were they tried together?
They were. And the prosecution had a pretty strong case, at least against Rosa, you might argue, but I would say also against May. They had Eric's version of events, and he was very credible as he was found at the scene, and everything seemed to line up with his version. And they had a mountain of evidence. Remember, at the scene, they found stun guns, tasers, and handguns containing the defendant's DNA, as well as a taser with Rosa and Sally Hill's DNA on it. And so it was obvious that she had tased Sally as well in this attack. There was also a backpack with crossbows, a hunting knife, rope, a glass cutter, and a pry bar.
So they were probably there to kill Eric as well.
Yes, yes. It also, it seems even excessive, though, for two murders. Like the amount of things they had and the items that they had. If you have a gun, I mean, they have so many. They have such a mixed bag, literally. It's almost a little bit bizarre. And get this, Rosa's car, which was found not far from the house, contained a samurai sword and leg irons.
What?
Isn't that even a samurai sword? The crossbows, tasers. This is like excessive and odd, right?
Yeah.
A search warrant had also been executed for May's home, which turned out to be a treasure trove. And you know what? I want to say, I said May's home, but what I read or what I heard was that there was a property that was in May's name. And I got the impression that this might have been a second property and not necessarily her primary residence, just
well,
so
I was going to ask, where's her husband in all this?
Hold that, because he would come in later a little bit too. Okay, so they get a search warrant for this residence and they find bullets that match the bullets that were found at the crime scene. Now, they find handwriting that talked about revenge for Rosa with Eric and his family's names on it. The handwriting appeared to come from two different people, too, which I think was key in their case in establishing that both Rosa and May had colluded in this crime. They found a to-do list, so it had, like, target practice, acquire weapons, etc. on it. And these lists were dated about 1 month prior to the actual crimes.
So they dated the list.
Yes, they dated
They
the list.
listed what they wanted to do. It's in their handwriting.
Yes.
Okay.
I often wonder about what people are thinking when they do this and they want to commit a crime that they're hoping to conceal. There were also notes from Rosa that made it very obvious that she was stalking Eric as well, like noting the times when he was home. And this was part of the preparation, I think, as well. When did he leave for work? When did he come home? What was his routine? Their computers also revealed Google searches for how to murder, the best way to kill, how to poison, use explosives, and on and on.
So this is all clearly showing premeditation.
Oh, yeah, I think we have a clear case for premeditation here. The pair had called their plan Operation Custody, and it was as follows. Here's the plan, and here is the motive. Get custody back from Eric. How to do that? frame him for killing his grandmother, Sally. Why? Well, because she would confront him about molesting his daughter. And so they would get Eric to write a confession to the crime, after which he would take his own life by suicide. And then there would be no custody dispute. And also Rosa would be vindicated from those false allegations of molestation that she made against Eric earlier.
So they were, they were looking to stage a murder-suicide.
They were looking to stage a murder-suicide. This is so brazen. I do wonder what makes like a person think that they can get away with this type of crime, because this is so brazen. Mm-hmm. This is such an elaborate, excessive plan.
Well, there was evidence of delusions, right? So she probably had a delusional disorder and clearly thought that maybe that she would be able to pull this off and get away with it. I don't know.
Right. Well, I mean, I think she did think that, but I just wonder.
I'm surprised about May. Like, does May have a history of anything? Because
that's the hard part of this case. We don't know that.
Yeah.
And like, there's not that much information public about that. So this is the problem. It doesn't seem like May had a history, though. And I don't know that Rosa had much of a history either. Okay, regardless, the prosecution has a strong case, but the defense has their own story, as they usually will, or, a good defense will. However, I'm not sure if you'll think this is a good story. And I will say that Rosa took the stand to tell it. So Rosa said that she believed Eric was sexually abusing their daughter and that she was panicking over Elizabeth having to be with her father, to returning to his care. She said that she awoke from a nightmare on the day of her crime to her daughter saying, "No, Daddy." And so she took her taser and other gear and headed over to Eric's house immediately.
Because she's trying to set up a crime of passion, which is ridiculous.
Okay, well, it gets worse. She says when she arrived, she looked through the window and she saw Eric fondling their daughter while the two were lying naked on a futon. But she froze, not knowing what to do. She panicked, and so she waited. According to Rosa, she waited for Eric to leave. And when he left for work, emotional and panicked, she confronted Sally because she thought Sally would do something. She thought Sally would immediately take action and be disturbed about what she had seen. But Rosa said that Sally said that Eric was Elizabeth's father and he could do what he wanted. She further said that Sally, 91-year-old Sally, then grabbed a knife or an object like it and swung it at Rosa. And so in response, Rosa said she hit Sally with a broom.
So now she's saying self-defense? It's ridiculous.
Yep, she said Sally fell back, gagging, before going unresponsive. She said that's why she used the taser after. She tased her to see if Sally would have a response, to see if she was alive.
So she was almost like trying to get her to come back to life.
Yes.
Got it. Okay.
This is really the story.
It's absurd. Her lawyers were not smart for putting her on the stand.
I wonder the same thing. Like, with this kind of story, how could you put up this? I don't know if she was insistent. I don't know if they thought it would have a better spin. Rosa said that she then called her mother to come over and help her because she panicked, and that's why May was there. Rosa said that she moved Sally's body to the garage on her own, and when her mother arrived close to 5:30 p.m., she was not initially aware of what happened. Instead, Rosa said that she asked her mom to watch Elizabeth while she spoke to Eric about custody. But when Eric came home, he attacked Rosa, infuriated that she was there. Rosa said that her mother tried to help her, but that Eric had hit her mother in the head with a baton. So now she's trying to explain how May got in an altercation with Eric as well, and how this began with Eric. She managed to stun him with the taser before grabbing Elizabeth and holding on to Elizabeth and putting Elizabeth aside while she tried to reason with an irrational Eric. The police then arrived. In the end, Rosa said that she never intended to kill Sally or Eric, but that she responded to the events that unfolded, and her mom had no involvement in Sally's murder. That's the full story.
Okay.
I
think it's clear what's going to happen here, but
I mean, do you think the jury was going to believe this story? No. Of course not. They did not believe the story. On June 28th, 2011, the jury convicted Rosa and her mother, May, of 1 count of first-degree murder premeditated.
Good.
In August of 2011, the two were sentenced to life without the possibility of parole for the murder and attempted murder of Eric. However, Amy, on appeal, May's murder charge was overturned, but her conviction for the attempted murder stood.
On what grounds? Do you know?
I can't remember specifically, but basically they found that there was not enough evidence to support that May was involved in Sally's murder. They could show definitively that with DNA that Rosa had attacked her, but they really could not show how May was involved in the murder of Sally. They just said the evidence wasn't clear to support that. However, her attempted murder of Eric, the conviction for that stood, and she still had a life sentence for that as well. So I don't think she's going anywhere. Now, you asked about May's husband, Ping. I was surprised to find out, because I didn't hear much, or I don't think this was even in the documentary, but I was surprised to find out that he pled guilty to being an accessory to the crime after the fact and was sentenced to 4 years in prison.
What was his role? Or
I'm glad that you wrote that. In my next line, while his role is unclear, he stated that he drove May to Sally's house to help Rosa.
So he just voluntarily offered that information?
No, I believe that he was that he was caught in some way. I don't know how he was caught, but when questioned about it and when he was taking the plea, he said that his role was basically as the driver.
Okay.
Eric says that he did not believe that Ping was only a driver. However, Eric never saw Ping in the home, so it is possible that he was in the car the entire time. Very bizarre. We're talking about mother, father, and daughter now in this elaborate, bizarre crime. Now, while the roles are unclear and maybe all the details not entirely clear, what is clear, again, is that all three family members participated in this brutal, violent, senseless crime. So now we have to kind of talk about why. Let's break this down. There's a lot to unpack here. I focus mostly on my explanation of Rosa's behavior here. So we're going to geek out to theory now, Amy. Are you ready?
I think her motivation is the clearest, for sure.
Well, her motivation is the clearest, absolutely. So I'm going to explain this in a few different ways. Yes, her motive is very clear. So I'd say in that regard, this has got to be classic rational choice, right? She made a series of choices, a utilitarian plan to further a goal. The goal was to get Eric and Sally out of the way. By the way, they wanted Sally out of the way as well, just on the rare chance that Sally would petition, I guess, for guardianship, which Sally would have been too old to, but they just wanted to make sure that there was going to be absolutely no chance of that, right?
Yeah.
But in rational choice, as we know, step by step, they rented storage, they gathered weapons, they made lists, they planned out this crime. The plan also reflects what we call bounded rationality. We don't talk a lot about that in these crimes. We probably should talk more, in that the plan had fatal flaws likely caused by extreme emotion and paranoia driving it. So it's not completely rational. It's bounded by a person's perception, the facts they have at the time. This was an unbelievable plan, right? You thought, what's rational about this? Well, it's not exactly rational.
Yeah, that's why I feel like rational choice theory is sometimes difficult for students to grasp, because they'll say, that's not rational. Rational means rational means we can understand why it happened. I'm like, no, that's not what rational means. Rational means that the actor, through their perception, through their lens, like you said, bounded rationality. It's very different. I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah.
It's very different. Again, not something we talk about all the time, but I'm going to remember that. But how could they still have arrived at this unbelievable plan? Did Rosa ever love Eric? Did she like controlling him? Or was he just there for the utility of having a grandchild? So it was suggested that May really wanted a grandchild. Rosa's an only child. She wasn't really making connections. So the plan was just to have a grandchild. And then once Eric served his purpose, wasn't really necessary anymore. Let me talk a little bit about Rosa then, too, her personality and her behavior, because she presented with some paranoia, as well as being manipulative, jealous, controlling. So, of course, we don't diagnose anyone, but I will say that I see some symptoms or traits that fit with paranoid personality disorder, which is marked by exaggerated distrust of other people and suspicion. And I don't know if you know this, Amy, but that paranoid personality disorder affects approximately 4 to 5% of the population.
Well, that's diagnosed too.
Yes. Good point. It's kind of like when we say crimes, what percentage of crime? It's actually what's reported. So what's measured, right? But another thing I didn't know that I found interesting was that 75% of people with this disorder have another comorbid personality disorder, and it's often.
Can I guess?
Yes, go ahead.
Can I guess? Narcissistic personality disorder, maybe borderline, maybe histrionic, a little bit of everything.
Narcissistic, borderline, and antisocial personality.
Okay, I was close. Yep. Okay, there's a lot of crossover there.
There's a lot of crossover.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that we're saying that everyone who has this personality disorder has that. It's what the research tells us about the percentages. It seems like her distrust fueled her irrational actions, while her manipulative tendencies seem to suggest some of the personality disorders that I suggest above. Unfortunately, I don't have enough information about her background to know for sure, but these are, educated guesses. But then, okay, I'm just going to keep going because I couldn't stop on this one. You also have her mother and father participating in these crimes. So is this a case of learned behavior in the home? Are they afraid of Rosa, actually? Or are her parents' involvement and this involvement, do they suggest that maybe this isn't an isolated event?
Yeah, it could be.
It seems extreme for both parents to be involved in a double homicide.
Yes, but for that, I think rational choice theory, again, bounded rationality can work. And I also think that if we knew more about May's background, we probably would see personality disorder as well. So now we have a biological explanation.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think for sure learning theory has to come in here. It's one of those cases where I think it's a little bit of everything.
Well, I didn't even finish. I have one more. Okay. I mean, one that I'm surprised.
I know.
Okay.
Sorry. Strain theory.
Of course, strain theory.
The removal of a positive stimuli, meaning she lost her child, and she lacked the proper coping mechanisms to deal with that loss, and she turned to crime.
Right. Yep. Okay. I think that paired with her paranoia, and I'd love to know to what extent she was paranoid. I don't know the full extent, but I think that definitely pushed her. Okay, so you got. Well, of course.
Sorry, there's another one.
I think I knew. All right, go ahead.
What about bond theory? She didn't have any strong bonds to anyone really in her life besides her parents. It sounded like she was a bit of a loner. And
she was, yeah.
I think that could have contributed to some of these issues as well.
Yeah, she was a perfect storm, I guess, right? I think regardless of the assessment, I'm sure we can all agree that Rosa and her mother are dangerous women, very dangerous women. Now, some might believe that May just got roped into Rosa's scheme, but I think she was part of the planning and the crimes.
Yeah.
And I believe that her punishment is just as well.
And as far as we know, Elizabeth is with her father, and they're trying to somehow move on the best they can from this.
Yes. Okay. So this happened, years ago. But on a positive note here, Eric Hill reported having a wonderful relationship with his daughter throughout the years, who he raised on his own after the trial. He said that his daughter is artistic and that she grew up to become a wonderful young woman, despite the tragedy that marked her early childhood. And there are photos of the two of them kind of throughout the years. So it does seem that for Eric and Elizabeth, there was somewhat of a happy ending in this story.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, we're very glad to hear that they are doing well. And I certainly appreciated the suggestion for this case. I'm really looking forward to what other people hear. Did you ever remember the case of the explosives in the trunk? Because I couldn't.
No, but I did think of some more information. So if our listeners or viewers can come up with the case, it was a case where a woman, they were recently married, they were pretty young, and she was very paranoid. And I think he wanted to leave her. And so she got really angry and she just kept calling in these threats. It's going to come to me. I'm going to call you in like an hour. And you're like, I thought of it.
Our recording will be long over by then, but I'll still welcome the phone call because you're going to call me in an hour no matter what. So
anyway, yeah.
Yeah. So let's be clear. All right. Well, before we go today, I actually just want to quickly mention our Patreon book club this month. I am very excited about it. And this month, I let the patrons vote on the book that they wanted. and they selected a book called The Red Parts by Maggie Nelson. I got to tell you, it was a close tie. It's a true story. I believe her aunt was a murder victim, and I think this is her account of what happened when she thought the real perpetrator was caught. I'm really looking forward to this book, but it was a close tie. I hadn't either. It came up on like it popped up as like a suggested read, but it was between this and an Anne Rule book, Small Sacrifices, which again was just about tied. But I think that one wasn't available on Audible. So we are starting.
I may join. Join this time.
You should. I'm very excited about it. And there are a lot of other perks on Patreon. So for those of you considering a book club or some other type of fun, consider supporting us there. We get a lot of great feedback from some of the events, virtual happy hours, the extra episodes, lectures, and a lot more. All right. Thank you, everyone, so much for joining us today. And we'll catch you next time on Women in Crime. Women in Crime is written and hosted by Meghan Sachs and Amy Shlosberg. Our producer is James Varga. Script editing is by Abagail Belcastro. Audio editing is by Siler Burr and Jose Alfonso. And music is by Desert Media. If you enjoy the show, please remember to follow and leave a review. You can also support the show through Patreon, where you can get access to additional ad-free content such as exclusive full-length episodes, lectures, a book club, and virtual happy hours with Meghan and Amy. For more information, visit patreon.com/womenandcrime. Sources for today's episode include an episode of the docuseries Worst Ex Ever, The People vs. Hill 2015 legal brief, The Sun, and Mercury News.